Ready for the session? Excited? Actually, today it's a great honor for me personally to introduce such an amazing honor. I'm Ramzi Abu Nimr. I'm an architect. I'm a global shaper by the World Economic Forum, and I'm Palestinian based in Central Asia. I'm working as an architecture manager for a construction company in a new city, and our session today is about building new cities, but for impact. The urban areas are already home to almost 55% of the current population of the world. And it's expected to expand drastically in the upcoming years. A lot of statistics from different sides say 65%, 70%, even 80%. Some people assume that people will live in cities. And let me first introduce the speakers, and then we'll dig deep inside those topics. I think there is a lot of topics about it. So if you have any questions, please be assured that at the end of the session, we will ask all the questions to our speakers. Let me first introduce Mr. William McDonough. If I would speak about him, I would go for hours. I'm an architect, so I studied about him. It was part of my curriculum. So he's the chief executive of McDonough Innovation, and he's actually a co-author and an author for many books that we studied. And if you want to hear all about him, there is a book in the room around you that speaks about his achievements in the past years. And let me start with a question to him. When you want to design cities for children, what do you think about?
I think design is the first signal of human intention. And so what are our intentions? Let's remember. And I think the idea that we design for children is really important today. And one of the great privileges of being with MISC here is it's about our youth. And I'm worried about the youth. And I think this idea of design for impact, when people talk about social impact, they say that's a good thing. When they talk about environmental impact, they talk it's a bad thing. So what is it? What does this mean? So I think the next generation is, the next generation, we're handing this over. And when I see things like net zero as a goal, how do you tell a young child our goal is nothing? We're trying to clean up, yes, but as a goal, when they're trying to be 100% fabulous. So, and we talk about design on products and things as life cycles of inanimate objects. You know, we call it a life cycle, but really these are what we call products of service. You want to use it. So we don't want to design for end of life. Whatever the young people need to hear, they don't need to hear us telling them we're designing for the end of life. What does this mean? So intentions are important. So I recommend we all look at places like Curitiba, Brazil, in 1973, where the mayor, who was an architect, Jaime Lerner, decided to love his children in the city. And just listen to what happened. He created a program called Waste is Not Waste. And the children collected all the materials and put it in the right bins and got rewarded with bus tokens for their families so that they had mobility and the children were involved. And one thing after another. And so he thought about the children every time he made a decision in the city. And if you want a livable city, the 10-year-old child should be free to roam. So that's what we designed for.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Very inspiring.
Is it okay if I jump in? I'm sorry.
Definitely. Please go ahead.
Because what you say is so inspiring, and also designing for kids has been maybe 90% of my short career. For many years, I did kindergartens in the war-torn areas of Colombia. I go into the jungles and work with these communities. And one thing that I learned through the research on how to design for kids is, especially, I mean, I was doing a lot of educational spaces, and I grew out of that and into urban spaces, so kind of in the Curitiba mindset with a different type of solution that I could talk about also. But what was really interesting for me when engaging in this idea of designing for kids was actually something that you were mentioning too, and I maybe thought of it in a different way, but was how is the design of the built environment adding to the educational experience of the kids, right? And I was working in places where when a kid reaches the age of 6, they enter school, which means they have to choose a side of the war. Either they're with the guerrilla or they're with the military. You can't, they don't give you another option. So you're aligning with, you're part of a war when you're 6 years old. It's mind-blowing. And so I started doing these kindergartens that were breaking down the codes of architecture. So I didn't have doors. I had 8 different ways of coming in and out of the rooms. I didn't have a centralized set of bathrooms for the kindergarten, so the kids could go to the bathroom whenever they wanted, not when the teacher could bring them over. I didn't have one big playground in the middle. I had 12 different playgrounds scattered all around the place, so when they wanted to go out and see the sun, they could. When they wanted to go out in the rain, they could. And ultimately what I realized is that through the breaking down of the codes of architecture, I could actually promote the creation of individuals capable of decision making, hoping that when they reach this age of schools and have to face the war, maybe they see a different path through it, and it's not a binary decision. Maybe there's a third avenue that I could pursue. And it was really amazing for me how thinking about how kids would relate with the environment actually gave me a reason to do architecture.
And actually, I totally agree with you. First, I have to introduce you. Daniel Fledman, he's actually the lead architect of Zeta Architecture Workshop. We're going not as planned, not in the consequences. No, but it's fine. Because I think I totally agree with both the ideas that the actual users of our future cities are not us. It's even we in the youth age, but it's still not us. It's the children that probably they're not born yet. So it's really meaningful to think about them when we even just start thinking about the idea, creating something for the future. So I would introduce our third speaker right now. He's Mr. Ryan Fayez, and he's the Deputy CEO of NEOM. Actually, he's on ground building a new city for the future generations that we're speaking about right now. Mr. Ryan, if you're a young global leader, you have a lot of pressures on your arms, and because you hold a position that you can really change the life of the future children. How do you think about it, and how do you approach designing and even talking to the designers, architects, and decision makers within NEOM?
Great, thank you very much, and thanks for Misk for inviting me to be here. I'm not a designer, I'm not an architect, so I'll be speaking a little bit out of line in discussing NEOM. But I think when we think of NEOM as the city of the future, which is literally what it means, the new future is what NEOM stands for. We think of a future way of livability. It's not purely the hard assets and the nice architecture that you see. There is actually what makes NEOM what it is the softer parts that creates the future of livability for the next generation. And it is by definition a generational project. So when we talk about going back to the theme we first started with in terms of accessibility to the youth and to the children and to everyone, the line as a linear city is one that comes from the vision of being walkable, being accessible, and being close to nature. So for everyone including the youth, to have a 5-minute access to all amenities, to a hospital, to a museum, walking access, but at the same time having the 5-minute access to nature. The way we like to describe it, when you look at Manhattan and you look at London, where you have the Hyde Park in the middle of the town, or Manhattan where you have Central Park in the middle of the town, which is a park in a city, the line is actually a city in a park. So a city in the middle of nature rather than the nature being in the middle of the city. That way it gives full accessibility to everyone, not those just living around the park, to nature, the best part of the nature that Saudi has to offer. And I would like to, maybe when it's ready, extend an invitation for you to come and see at least the exquisite nature that we have, that hopefully that will be accessible to all when the city is built. More on that, but I can stop.
Definitely, I can't stop you, you know. And since we're speaking, the first 3 speakers spoke about the youth, I wouldn't be very proud, like more proud, to introduce Gaia Reddy. She's a global shaper. She's an innovator. She's a founder of Create Foundation, and she's doing solutions on ground in the Indian communities and providing some sustainable solutions to the people. Please, if you would mention a little bit about the work on ground you do to those communities and how it matters for you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to start by saying it's such a pleasure to just be in this company. So I want to say that every city has its own flaws and problems. So, but we need to sort of identify the most pressing ones and sort of do something on ground to address it. So from that point of view comes the idea for my foundation. It does not focus on work around, where the Indian CSR funds are going, which is education or maybe even disabilities focus. Due respect, they require that fund, but I wanted to focus on the need for better urban planning and development. As Bangalore city is one of the fastest growing cities in the world. In fact, just during the lockdown, Bangalore city signed up most of its commercial real estate space to large corporations that want to come and set up businesses in Bangalore city. So we have a big software multinational corporation conglomerate that sits there and have their offices out of there. We have large like innovation centers of large organizations like Accenture, Uber, etc. You could think of a company and they pretty much have a presence in Bangalore, and Bangalore offers 55% of all the software that comes out of India to the world, right? It comes out, and we also have the largest startup ecosystem, and most unicorns that come from India come from Bangalore. So now you can only imagine how much traffic is in Bangalore and how much we are pressed for simple resources like water, access to clean, safe drinking water. Bangalore city is dependent on 3 major sources of water, which is our groundwater table, a river that flows through our city, but we have a geopolitical issue with the neighboring state, and rainwater. But the thing is, our groundwater table is depleting, and we sometimes feel the burden of it. So we say, oh, what are we going to do? Actually, by this rapid urbanization, we have created these reflective surfaces which are also creating microclimates in the city, where one road in Bangalore will have rain, but the parallel road has like bright sun. So these are situations that we're facing, and recently we had urban flooding. But these issues can be fixed, and what I do is I bring a lot of conversation around, hey, as individuals, we can do rainwater harvesting, because the rain that we get is enough rain that can sustain us through the year. And then I'm just asking individuals, can you make gardens in front of your house? Or can you, as a community, get together and invest in a community rainwater harvesting system? Or even we have plants that are indigenous to Bangalore that actually recharge the groundwater because of the way the roots are designed in the natural plants, right? So this is one of the conversation. And the other major issue that my city has is urban mobility, which is too much traffic to get anywhere, but we do it anyway because we have to get somewhere to do our work and meetings. So I want to bring light to conversations and do work on get more people to walk. So I have a project called Nadiona, which means Let's Walk Bangalore. So there's a lot of infrastructure flaws, and hopefully we will correct it. And this is just the city that I live in, but I'm sure all other Indian and other cities across the world have similar issues, and it's just a matter of understanding where we're overshooting our resources and where we're underusing these resources to sort of bridge the gap of how much can we optimally use the resources that we have. Yeah.
Amazing, a lot of insights. And actually, it's on-ground problems that a lot of cities face. But now we're building new cities, and I think, Mr. William, what innovation and technology can solve and avoid such problems from the start from existing. You know, such problems do affect every person's life in many hubs in the world, and we have the opportunity of designing new cities, and we need the capacity of those cities to accommodate the future population and providing new solutions to the world in that matter. What would be some few recommendations that technology and innovation could foster the development and help avoid such problems in new cities?
I think it brings us back to this question of intention, but it also brings us to some very interesting examples that are actually represented here. I had the privilege of being on the Higher Council of NEOM in its formation. And we had 12 ministers and 12 civilians. And we spent 2 years with our sleeves rolled up in various cities discussing exactly these questions. What is the future of health, mobility? But just take a look at some of their ambitions for a moment. 5 minutes walking to everything you need. No cars. The most excellent of healthcare. We discovered, even in the United States with Walmart itself, 2 million employees, discovered that the best economics of healthcare was to reach out to the most excellent healthcare available anywhere in the world for their employees, even if they just hurt their back in the warehouse. Find them the best healthcare. Amazing. So when you think about it, the first thing to do is what is excellent? And offer that to everyone. I love that. So I think we see a lot of that. And one of the great things about working in the kingdom right now, I came in to help with that, but also to help with the Red Sea development. Because I'm very amazed that we have coral reefs to this day that are still pristine. Think of that. So combining nature, and when we talk about NEOM, for example, in architecture, we often talk about the machine in the garden as a building, right? Or we talk about the garden in the machine. And what we're dealing with is the ecosystems, and that we could call the biosphere. And the biosphere wants to be regenerative, right? That's how it works, sun, water. So when we came out of Glasgow, somebody said, what would you tell the children after Glasgow? And I said, well, just everybody should stop and think like a tree. Because it's very interesting. The idea of zero emissions is interesting, but trees emit oxygen. We don't want zero emission trees. Carbon is for capturing. That's what trees do. And hydrogen is for oxidizing. That's how we get water. Well, if you look at something like NEOM, they said, okay, we're going to be 100% renewably powered. What an amazing statement. That just gets everybody creative. Then you got, and we're going to have 1 cent a kilowatt hour solar energy there soon. So, and then the other is with hydrogen, well, you can also take it from water if you have renewable energy. So all these things start to connect. And I think that's part of it. It's all one thing. But that principled thing should be safe, it should be healthy, it should be generous, it should be excellent. And if we allow ourselves to share around the world for all these things, this is really the key to it all, I think, is communication, sharing, and principled behavior by adults behaving like children.
Amazing, amazing. When we put, I think, people in the core center of our concentration, when we do design such spaces, we do come up with health care and the future of the generations to be built out of that, you know. And I will move. I will move to you,
Okay.
because you have now concrete solutions to those problems, or concrete systems to avoid such problems in a new city. Can you give us some examples of what you do in NEOM, and how do you avoid bigger problems that appears in many hubs in the world, in even places like New York, like London?
Sure. I want to start by saying, and I'm glad we have these bright minds sort of speaking about the topic, by saying that NEOM is an initiative and a movement that's never been done before. So if we start with the acceptance that this is completely revolutionary and completely groundbreaking, then we can start accepting some of the challenges. If we simply look at it just like any other project, then people may be skeptical or trivialize some of the issues that we see. So in doing that, we need to think creatively as to how to address the city of the future. And some of the examples that you mentioned, and we talked about 100% renewable, which William talked about. This, we're blessed with very good solar radiation, but also very good wind energy. So all of Neom will be powered by solar and wind, 100% renewable. And that brings a very different definition to desalinated water. Historically, when we talk about desalinated water, we think about it as polluting the industry. Now, when it's all 100% renewable, zero liquid discharge back to the ocean, and using the brine for commercial development, all of a sudden you can greenify and have more landscapes with actually net positive carbon emission rather than net zero or net negative. So it requires a lot of innovation in technology. It requires a lot of creativity. It requires a lot of investment and experimentation, because many of these technologies haven't been built at such a scale before. But this is what's needed to create something new. If it's just incremental and more of the same, but maybe a little bit better, we will not get there. So I just want to put that context in the mindset of people as they think of Neom. It's a step change in everything that we're doing, everything that the world is doing, and we have the fortune of having the location and the capital and the vision behind, obviously, all of this through His Royal Highness, the Chairman of Neom and the Crown Prince, to push the envelope and push the boundaries to get many of these revolutionary, unthought of ideas into execution and into reality. As I said earlier, it's a generational project. We cannot think about it as when is the next. We have an island opening up next year, Sindala, and we welcome everyone to come. But when you think of the idea of Neom, it's not just the physical infrastructure, it's all the software that is there and tangible to support it. The enablers we have, I think we're blessed to have these enablers in terms of the location, in terms of the weather, in terms of obviously the renewable energy, having nature at the forefront of everything. 95% of the area of Neom will be a nature reserve, untouched. So everything we're talking about is only.
I think we have to have a round of applause for such 95%. It's not an easy percentage, no?
Trust me, building on 5% only and delivering on all of these ambitions is not easy, but that's a challenge that's upon us, and I think we have the right team to deliver.
Amazing, amazing. Gaia, I'll move to you because that's the voice of youth. We brought it here to give you some inspiration of what youth do require in such environments. How does we prioritize, I forgot how to spell it, prioritize the youth inclusion in such cities, you know? Part of those cities are built for us, are built for the next generation, and are built for a room of innovation. What insights you can give to decision makers that they have now in their hands the ability to change the future that we could live in?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think I would, personally, I would prefer multiple small cities rather than one big city, because I feel like when we have one big city, we sort of concentrate all our jobs and all the amenities in one area, which then again increases the burden in that area. But once we decentralize and we create the ability to have smaller pockets with different opportunities, that sort of gives us like lung space. So that's really my vision of what is a great city. Yes, we need like a 5-minute walkable city with all the amenities that we can get, but also different pockets where we can access different kind of opportunities, which then allows us to move around and explore and sort of feel that childhood. Because I remember growing up is I remember running around or like trying to learn to climb a tree. But today, because of all this urbanization, I don't see children even having access to a tree because someone has, you know, put up a compound wall, or someone has sort of said it's in a park, and to access the park you need to take your car or a two-wheeler because it's kind of far away. So that is essentially the problem of the existing cities, but I'm super hopeful for like future cities. I mean, everything that this future city is sounding like everything that I would like to have, you know, or be a part of.
Amazing, amazing. Daniel, you had several interventions in several areas of the world, in Colombia state in the US, but also in Colombia country. And I think there are a lot of problems that we face in our societies, and solutions can be simple, others can be big, but drastically they can change the lives of the people living in that area where we provide solutions. Can you give us a couple of examples of what you think critical problems our society face, and how through architectural conversations, architectural workshops, we could really design such areas?
Well, the whole idea of architecture as a workshop and an inclusive process where you bring in citizens is kind of the base of everything I've done in my career. So there's a lot to learn there. However, one thing that I think is really interesting whenever I've looked at what NEOM is doing and I hear Rajat speak, I am maybe half of my life nowadays is trying to create, I'm not going to say create, but maybe recreate dense, mixed-use, layered urban cities. The big, sprawled cities that we inherited from the modern times with the segregated uses and the long commutes and the extensive networks of infrastructure worked for a while. They did a lot of good. But I feel like nowadays we have a lot of embedded and underutilized, embedded carbon in underutilized buildings within our existing consolidated cities. And we need to reutilize it. We need to build up. We need to layer it. There's this whole idea of reshoring. There's this kind of push for nationalism built in the whatever country you want to put onto it. And we have a ton of abandoned, underutilized buildings, very well located, new types of industry, digital, like Industry 4.0. We can now live on top of our industries, you know? For 50 years we couldn't. I think we're going back to the medieval times. And when you look at it very kind of diagrammatically or from a taking off the layers of what it's going to look like, what it's going to feel, but just what is happening, I've always felt that Neom is like the new medieval city in the good sense, right? Because in the medieval city, you would have your business in the ground floor, then you live on top of it, and your family did shoes. The next door neighbor did bags, the next door neighbor did iron, and it was this kind of rich, consolidated, multi-use, very efficient city. Obviously, Industrial Revolution came in and everything became dirty and produced smoke, and it wasn't healthy anymore, so modern planning arrives, and it all makes sense. But at this point where industry is now, I think it's allowing us to have a layered construction of our existing cities. And I think NEOM, to a certain degree, is offering a ground-up vision of how that can happen. Because when you look at that, at the line, it's huge. It's going to be really tall. Obviously, the bottom is going to be dark, and no one wants to live in the first and second floor in NEOM. But that's beautiful space for industry to happen. That's beautiful space for all of these uses that don't necessarily need a tree permanently in front, right? And so I think consolidated cities now are not new cities, but to a certain degree are in a very parallel track to what new cities are trying to accomplish.
That's amazing. It actually lies with a concept in architecture that I studied about urban acupuncture. It's like finding the problems, pinprick it, and find a specific solution for it. But when you have the chance to avoid it at all from the start, you probably will be able to have amplifying the effect on the people residing in the place. So utilizing all layers of the city definitely is important, but also finding spaces for everyone in the community, because some people would manufacture underground, others would work in taking care of the plants that they're also planted within the same area. So that's very inspirational. I would ask one last questions to all of you. You can talk about it as well. Um, like, what are the main like critical ideas that you think that they should involve in building new cities uh, for all of you, that you don't want them to miss it? Since we have a solid example from NEOM, we have the opportunity to really affect on what could be in NEOM. So what are the social aspects that you would like to happen in such spaces?
NEOM is one extreme example. There are other extreme examples of many things. We're experimenting with all of them. And I think the key messages are all sustainability, like politics, is local. So the issue of what is the solution here has so much more to do about here than it does about there. So keeping that is fundamental, I think, a key thing. The other is the industry, as you pointed out. We work with industry down to the molecule as well. And Amazon has just declared our certification the finest in the world because we look at every single molecule. And the reason that's interesting is that you can have factories and you can live in them. We have textile mills producing drinking water. Like, this is experimentation. You don't do it overnight, and you have to be principled in your behaviors. So I think all sustainability is local. This idea of the children, in Curitiba, when they had built these schools, they didn't build a school in the middle of Curitiba, or a library, because Jaime said then the children can't get to it, and it's full of books that are old already, and they may want to do something else. So he built 48 little libraries around the city, all within 12 minutes walking distance of every child. So every child could walk to a library. And then he gave them the World Wide Web. And this is 1994. He met with Tim Berners-Lee to find out what is the future of books. And they want to go to everywhere. So he gave them all the internet before we even had it, the web. Amazing, in Brazil. But then the favelas started coming, and they had little children. And they would come into Curitiba, but they had no clothes. And the citizens complained. They said, we have these children using these libraries we built. Your parents don't pay taxes. And so they had to bring Jaime back as the governor. And he listened to them. He said, what do you think we should do? And they said, we should build a wall and keep these children out of using our libraries. And so Jaime said, oh, interesting idea. But what if we took the budget for this wall, which I priced out here, and we used it to build libraries for those children? What if we built libraries in their communities for them? That's what we're talking about here, children and learning. And that's what he did. So you just changed the question. How do you love all the children of all species for all time? It's different. How does the city do that?
Amazing, amazing. Ryan, I would just tailor the question a little bit different, because you're in a position that you can get a lot of information about NEOM. There is the physical aspect of NEOM, the buildings, the projects that we hear about, but I'm pretty sure there is a mentality that you also are experimenting in and developing. Can you share what type of social aspects, mentality that you see already started to exist in NEOM and you envision for the future?
First of all, I mean, we need to think of this. We need to have an open and inclusive community, which we currently do. We have more than 80 nationalities working in NEOM today. So if you think of the diversity that group of people can bring together, I think it's important as well to start thinking completely creatively and out of the box on how these solutions could come to bear. And I do believe, and I put myself one of them, the sort of older generation sometimes fail to see the creativity and the imagination that the younger generation would have. And I'll give you an example. When we launched The Line, it was a big launch globally across all channels. And the fascinating thing that happened is TikTok blew up. Twitter was okay, Instagram was okay. They all kind of followed it. But TikTok literally blew up. And the reason being, that segment is the young segment.
Youngest generation.
That looked at it and all related to it and saw the inspiration behind it. And all of a sudden you have young kids, and I see it here all the time. I meet people and who tell me, I have a teenage daughter or teenage son who know nothing about NEOM but saw the line, and for some reason it made sense for them. They want to live there, they want to move there. And I believe we all need to kind of embrace that creativity and embrace that imagination of understanding and maybe accepting that there's something that we cannot think about physically, but believing that there is a vision behind it that will make it work, with a big sense of imagination and creativity that many, I think, of the youngsters are relating to much more so than older people like me. The other thing is, there are certain aspects, as you mentioned, or as your question suggested, softer aspects that make NEOM, we're going to have a set of rules and regulations that are very competitive, that will attract livability as well as businesses to come and move there, because obviously you need to have that to attract people from all over the world. Just to also mention that NEOM is a city that aims to attract people from all over the world. It's a Saudi company, it's a Saudi city, but its target market is global. And the global audience is what we're trying to attract. So it has to be competitive globally. In addition to many other natural resources, not oil, sun, wind, beautiful weather, beautiful coastline, mountains, diversity of topography, mountains where there was snow. I was there actually 4 days ago, before coming here in Trojena, and there was actual snow.
Amazing.
It's not man-made snow. There was snow, and it was snowing that day. And it snowed there 2 days ago as well. So there's a lot of, I can go on forever.
You
but
can,
there's a lot
you
of
can go
softer
forever, and I
aspects.
can't stop you forever. You know, I would hear about it for all day long. But actually, let's move and let's keep some time for the questions, so you get to hear it from the people to answer it. Gaia, what impact we need?
I think I want to do this two-prong. One is with the existing older cities. I just think we need to acknowledge why they're made or why they are a certain way. For example, I think cities in countries like India, China, etc., definitely will have a larger carbon footprint, because we need to acknowledge that these countries are manufacturing for the world, and some parts of the West are just consumers of it. So naturally, they will always indicate a lower footprint, but it's not because of they have better industries. It's just we have the carbon heavy industries that are creating products that are being consumed over there. And the second thing with newer cities is, we need equity inclusion of communities like interspecies. We need to make sure that people are, and plants and animals are interacting. We need to make sure we have access for people with disabilities. We need to make sure opportunities are equal for all socio-economic statuses, right? We need to include all this in these cities, and we need to make sure that these elements exist. But one thing that's super close to my heart, and I really want to say, because we're discussing new cities, is we are creating new cities with a grand vision of what we want to give to our children. But I really think we need to build in our traditions and customs, because I don't want to go to the same looking city when I apply for a visa and then go to a country and then say, oh, hey, H&M, everywhere. I want to see homegrown brands, and I want to see home representation. I want to see, witness festivals, and those cultures need to come in, and those spaces have to be created in new cities, I guess.
Amazing, amazing. What remarks and highlights from your previous experience about how social development and how we tackle social development in existing cities that you wish it exists in newer cities?
Sure. Ultimately, when you talk about social justice in cities, you end up really kind of going back to environmental justice. Like, the biggest injustices, you see them when there's no water, there's no access to sun, there's no access to clean air. So it's kind of linked. And the way I've always talked about it or thought about it is, we have to think of our cities as bathtubs and not showers. You know, we live in lakes, not in rivers. And what that means is that if you decide to contaminate your bathtub, you're going to be bathing in it. It's going nowhere. If you contaminate the shower, it goes down the drain and it's more like a river. And so we've been thinking about our existence in the world very much as showers. We kind of contaminate the river and the river takes it. We are happy. And I think if we change the mindset into understanding how the lake works, because you are going to generate waste. There's no way you don't generate waste. There's no way you won't use resources. The ecosystem you're referring to, it's an organism. And the lake is able to process that whole organism. You know, when the fish goes and creates waste, it ends up being fertilizer for the bottom, and like waste from one is the jewels for the other, is food for the other. And I think that's kind of what I would wish we would be thinking about, like how can we inhabit bathtubs?
Amazing. I will leave, we have like literally 4 minutes for questions, so I would like, if any one of the audience would like to ask 1, 2 questions, maybe we have time to it. Any questions? Go ahead.
First of all, thank you, everyone, lady and gentlemen, for this interesting session. When we talk about...
She's a global shaper.
Thank
I have
you.
to interrupt her, you know.
Thank you. When we're talking about the future and designing new cities, there's one thing that usually people visualize about the future back in 2001 and 2002, which is the skyscrapers. But today, in 2022, what is the future of skyscrapers when it comes to designing new cities? I'm from the UAE, so in the Saadiyat Island, which is a new city that we developed, there is not even a single skyscraper. So they're trying to create clean space. And after the COVID pandemic, you know, skyscrapers showed that, you know, when such pandemic happened, this is not the best place to live. So what are the thoughts of skyscrapers when it comes to building new cities of the future?
Thanks for the question. I don't know who would like to answer it. Please, let's start with you, Mr. William.
It's, again, there isn't a single answer. I think even as we have existing cities, the question of density is going to come up over and over again. So we have to solve for skyscrapers and density. If it's a pandemic issue, solve for that. But I think so many things in industry and design have to do with concentration and flow. Bringing together things, moving things. So there's a place for skyscrapers. We've seen it. I've lived in Manhattan for 17 years. And I enjoy Central Park a lot, for sure. But the cities are going to evolve in so many different ways. Let's solve for those things that you think are a problem. And so there's no one answer for everybody. In many cases, it'll be stop destroying the landscape. Other places, it'll be totally integrated with the landscape. It's going to depend on where you are. And I think this question of, if I could,
Yes,
this question of place and these questions. I wrote the Hanover Principles for the German government. It was for the World's Fair for the year 2000. The one that got most people in the engineering world having trouble with, because these things were like, insist on the rights of humanity and nature to coexist. Recognize interdependence, accept responsibility, create safe objects of long-term value, eliminate the concept of waste. Waste is food. Rely on natural energy flows. Understand the limitations of design. Be humble. 2 things. Do you know it took us 5,000 years to put wheels on our luggage? We're not that smart. We did, really. We went to the moon before we had wheels on our luggage. And we put, what, 2 wheels? 20 years later, we got 4 wheels. And now we have 8 wheels. Just look down there. So let's be humble. Anyway, but the one everybody had trouble with, it was last. Respect the relationships between spirit and matter. Consider all aspects of human settlement, including community, dwelling, industry, and trade, in terms of existing and evolving connections between spiritual and material consciousness. And they said, you got to get rid of this. And I said, make it number 6. No, we're getting rid of it. Make it number 3. You see where we're going? All the indigenous people I work with, that's the only principle, right?
I've never imagined a better ending for such session, you know. Like, we'll leave it at this quote. A round of applause for the speakers, actually. It's a great, great pleasure to be moderating such an amazing session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Very, really nice meeting you.
Yes, for sure.
Daniel, good to see you
Definitely.
again.
Thank you so much.